Hey, I'm TW Wright. How you doing, WBSE? I am here in Dublin, Ireland tonight, and I'm here with Finn O'Connor. Gonna get to meet him in a couple minutes. So we are here in the world famous Dingle bar, and this is the coolest place to drink an Irish whiskey. So we're gonna do a blind tasting on Irish whiskey. I'm not even sure what we're drinking yet. We'll be back in a second. We'll get it started. All right, so we're back, and we got our whiskeys poured here. We have 2 glasses. Cheers, Finn. So I've been the last few days. Finn's been showing me around Dublin. Fantastic city. I've always liked Irish whiskey, but I'm telling you what, I'm falling in love with it now. So we've got 2 Irish whiskeys here. Don't know what they are, and we're not going to try to guess what they are. We just want to enjoy them for what they are. So we'll take a smell and get things started. So, Finn is an author, and probably the most closest thing you're going to come to a absolute whiskey expert, especially in the Irish whiskey. He wrote this book, Glass Apart, and truth be told, I use this as a reference anytime I write anything and include anything about Irish whiskey in here. Fantastic job with this. So, tell us. We've been walking around Dublin today. Tell us, what's one thing you want everybody to know about Irish whiskey?
Well, I think, there's 2 Irish whiskies really. Well, 3. There's the new Irish whiskey, which is very experimental. There's an enormous new guard of distilleries coming on and doing stuff that's never been done in Ireland. Then there's the Irish whiskey that everybody knows, very light, very accessible. And then there's the 3rd, which is by far the oldest form of Irish whiskey, which is oily, which is spicy, which is gingery.
That's what I've always kind of the historical, traditional stuff.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, Ireland has sold the image of kind of smoother than thou for so long. And in fact, that whole idea of Irish whiskey was really born in the 1980s. But the much older history would be, again, the oilier, the kind of more mouth-filling. Again, it's a very, very textural drink, some of the old single posted whiskies. And Redbreast, John's Lane, Green Spot. When you give that a smell, so that's a pot still whiskey.
Yeah.
And you get that, and it almost kind of crawls up your nostrils, that weird heft, earth, tobacco, leather, marmalade.
Mouth-filling. Some creamy, but oiliness. Really nice, oily, viscous mouthfeel. Warm, not burned, but warm. This is I don't have a chance of guessing what it is. Not that we're trying to guess what it is. Matter of fact, I hope it doesn't become immediately apparent to you. Because that's the fun of it, is being able to enjoy a whiskey and not knowing what it is and not being biased by what other people have said about it. Whatever this is really delightful. It's got a nice sweetness to it, a lot of great dynamics.
And one thing I love, and I always tell people when you're trying special Irish pot still, give it a slightly larger mouthful than you would for the Scotch or for the bourbon, malt, etc. And because it's so much about its texture, you have that big chewiness. I mean, give it plenty of time, but have enough in there to kind of get a feel for that texture. This one especially, I think I know what this is, but it has this wonderful kind of tobacco-y, marmalade-y kind of base to it. It's that weird, there's a sweetness there, but it's not fruit. It's baked goods, it's cinnamon bun, it's marzipan, it's that kind of fresh out of the oven.
Light spice, light baker's spice. Yeah, almost a little toffee on the final finish when I let it drift away. Let's take a couple minutes and we're going to drink this. We'll be back in a second. So we've been sipping this, and this is great. Mentioned before, we're in the Dingle bar. This is down, what section of town do you call this?
City Centre.
City Centre. This is a great place to hang out. I mean, the whole culture here revolves around just the Irish culture, the food, the camaraderie, and of course, beer and whiskey being the top of the list for me. We've been enjoying this one. Definitely, it takes a few minutes for me for that pot still flavor. I think I'm getting it. Those unmalted grain notes kind of sinking in. I'm gonna get some nods over here, because if he starts shaking his head sideways, somebody let me know, because he's the expert. Speaking of which, being the expert, the Irish whiskey that I've leaned on a lot, with this work of art here, tell me a little bit about this book. Tell me about what you had to do to put this together. And I'm telling you guys, this is full of more information about Irish whiskey than I think any other book I've ever seen about any kind of whiskey. Tell me about you.
That's
the
a hard follow-up. Yeah, I mean, when I started that, and of course that would be about pot still whiskey. And there's a lot of great whiskey being made in Ireland that isn't pot still, but pot still whiskey for a lot of kind of Irish whiskey obsessives is still regarded as this, it's the only uniquely Irish style. Historically, it was very much the dominant style in this country, and then it nearly disappeared. You know, at the nadir there was just redbreast and green spot, and now we're seeing this enormous revival both in pot still whiskies available and in just public cognizance about the style. People are learning what it is, and it's such an odd term because of course a pot still is just
very not a very descriptive term.
Yeah,
kind of deceiving.
It's shortened from Irish pot still, which meant more like the way the Irish run the pot still. And then here we shorten everything and it just became pot still, you know. Pure pot still is the older term, single pot still is the new term. Again, Irish pot still is probably the closest. And it was in kind of discrete contrast to single malts, which are of course almost all made in pot stills. And you had two means of running that, either single malts, which dominated Scotland, and then you had a few single malt distilleries in Ireland historically, mostly in the north, Bushmills being the most famous, Coleraine, which has disappeared now, and then you had a few columns to the south around, then you had this mixed mash inheritance, malted barley, raw barley, and then once upon a time other unmalted grain as well, oats.
The oats, right? Yeah, you tell them about that. Well, fantastic book. You've got a lot of information. You've got a lot of research in there. You've had grants to research some of this stuff, I understand?
Yes, well, the grants only started coming after the book was out. I could have used some of the grants when I was writing the thing. But so what I was doing, when I started, pot still whiskey was a dead genre. It hadn't been called single pot, it was still called pure pot still. Only the obsessives in Irish whiskey knew what it was, but it was all over the forums, all over this stuff. And it took about 3 years to write this book, and when I was starting it was kind of a death lament for the style, and I was hunting down antique bottlings from the 50s, from the 60s, all these distilleries that had closed down, the old John's Lane distillery, old Cumber, these people, B. Daly. And while I was writing it, suddenly all these new distilleries started coming on tap and they were interested. Midleton took an enormous re-interest into really what was its birthright from the Powers and Jameson kind of families. You know, Jameson used to be a pot still whiskey, Powers used to be a pot still whiskey, but still there's now a Powers line out there of pot still expressions. And it started to reappear, you know, and again for so long in these kind of geekier ends of Irish whiskey, among the collectors, among the forums, people would obsess over oils and over gingers and over resins, that kind of crackly spice and and the kind of the oxymoron where you get, I mean, if you want to understand Irish pot still, it really comes down to texture and spice. Texture, that kind of oiliness, that viscosity, that grittiness. It's almost like it's made out of olive oil.
Like you're describing what I'm tasting right now.
Yeah, and it kind of clings to your mouth. And then the other is that spice. It's just basically more ginger than spice. Ginger, fern, resin. And they feel like they shouldn't happen at the same time, and they do. And whether it be redbreast where that kind of gets passed through sherry and you start getting like, you know, medjool dates and things, or whether you get green spot where it's kind of left on its own, it's a bit more kind of green apple, or whether you get some of the Powers pot still, you start getting more and more of those thicker oils that kind of, again, old leather, you know, heft.
With this, I'm almost getting a mouth moistening followed by a mouth drying. It's a burst of juice and then left with a sort of a drying effect.
Yeah.
I mean, really nice, delicious, but yet there's a complexity there and some dynamics that I really enjoy. All right, so we've been sipping this a little bit, and we just got the bottle, and this is what we got here. Now, I've had one of these the other night, but not this version, so I've never had this before. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts now that you know what you're drinking?
So this one disappeared for a while. It's been brought out again. So one of the odd sleeping giants of Irish whiskey is that unlike Scotch, we're not required to use oak. Now everybody does use oak, but the law just says wood barrels. And a few distilleries have been kind of reasonably calling that bluff and seeing, you know, well, what would happen if you put it in an acacia cask or if you put it in a chestnut cask. Now, usually
French chestnut.
French chestnut. So this is the kind of, so what Midleton have done is they've taken their single pot still whiskey, or one of their single pot still whiskies, and stuck it a little extra in these chestnut casks. My main takeaway from the chestnut is that weird, like mouth, almost like what you were describing as the mouth drying sensation.
Well, it's now that I see it has some sherry finishing. It's sort of that burst of juice. Makes sense for me. The Irish whiskey also has a warming and sometimes a mouth drying effect. I think it's from that unmalted barley. I don't know what it's from, but I tend to find that. And the sherry gives me that juice burst, and I think that's where maybe where I was getting it from in this. This is certainly a really nice, catching a complexity, which I now kind of attribute to. Number one, we got chestnut wood, a sherry finish. I mean, a lot of different things to draw some interesting flavors from. This has been great. I think we're going to get another pour of this.
Yeah.
I'm holding the bottle and I'm holding an empty glass.
I mean, one thing I love about the Method and Madness is I was saying to three different Irish whiskies, the kind of the old traditional oily stuff, and then there's the kind of softer, more marketable stuff, and then there's the third wave of kind of experimentalism that's just cropping up. And for me, Method and Madness pot still is almost like numbers 1 and 3 together. It's the revival of the old pot still style and the kind of injection of weird and wonky cask work. So it's great to see the tradition brought back with.
It's great, and they're not being hemmed in here with the tradition. Definitely enjoying all of the freedoms to do some interesting and innovative stuff with their styles. With their core Irish, style, the heritage and heraldry of the Irish whiskey. I really enjoyed this. Finn O'Connor, check out his book, Glass Apart, phenomenal book, one of the best things I've read as far as Irish whiskey goes. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Cheers.
Cheers, WBSE.
Because they're all